Hi everyone, welcome to the third week of the GloKnoCo project. As you see, it's slowly developing as we talk about the sector around sport for development and peace. And last week, week 2 was around peace building in particular. And we had specialists from around the world talking about peace in Colombia, Rwanda and Korea. This week, we're going to be talking about sort of the current context and understanding how sport for development works within a COVID environment. We're talking more generally about sport for development and peace sector. But as part of your task, we've assigned you to smaller groups to work through with our project partner specific questions. And rather than just sort of leave you to it and try to come up with some suggestions and answers, we also want to provide you with some tools about how you can analyze the situation and where we are. So last week we asked you to look at SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. And this week we're going to give you the opportunity to learn about PESTLE analysis and then to put that into practice. And I think one of the key things to think about in relation to the two types of analysis is that when we talked about strengths and weaknesses, often we were talking about the institution or the individual, maybe if you're doing this for yourself. But the opportunities and threats very much came from outside of the organization. And this week with PESTLE, which is political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental, these are external factors. So it's understanding the environment, the structures, the wider political, social, legal structures that you operate in will give you an opportunity to understand, okay, how does this project operate? What should it be doing? But also some of the problems that you might be facing or the questions that you're addressing. How does that then how can you then work through that based on that wider environment? So I will talk you through the template. So I'll quickly share my screen to put up the template. And again, I'll share this one earlier this week. I'll put it in an email to you because we struggled to share in real time on Zoom yesterday. Here's the template. And again, these questions in red are very much for your sort of prompting, but I think it's more about just used as a guide to think about what's affecting your project or your organization, and thinking about this in relation to the specific question that you're being asked. So, for example, political, what political factors, but this is partly about things like political stability. This is about other political factors. So this could be things, particularly in the UK, like Brexit. It could be things like globalization, or sort of political globalization. It could be, well, we've talked about the various projects, for example, particularly around peace building yesterday. What sort of political environment are we operating within in terms of, say, Korea with that feeling of being at war, or Rwanda, which is like a post-genocidal nation, or in Colombia with a political environment that is structured and colored by narcotics trade and paramilitary organizations associated with drugs. So you've got those sort of factors that your projects may be working in and to be thinking about. Economic, so maybe more obvious in relation to sort of the financial aspects, but these could be things like recession. This could be other factors that may be affecting you. So if you're working in different countries, what's the currency? What sort of is there inflation or interest rates that are associated with these things that may affect your business, your organization, or your project, particularly around sport for development and peace projects. Maybe economic is also about fundraising. What sort of funding is available? What are the likelihoods of people providing funding in this particular area for your project? So those are the things worth considering. Social are a bit more all-encompassing. So we're talking about what sort of social factors, cultural factors. This could be in a range of different things. This could be about consumer behavior. This could be about volunteering. Are people likely to volunteer for this project? Is there a culture of volunteering within the area that you're working within? Also, what sort of factors may affect participants? What are the perceptions or the preconceptions around, for example, playing football, as a lot of our projects are operating with football? What are how is it perceived in the community, and is there any baggage associated with it? So, as we talked yesterday, there's baggage associated with football in Colombia, for example. And also there's an expectation that if you play football, it's a route out of poverty, whereas rugby had a slightly different, and surfing had different impressions. So it's thinking about all of those sort of different, what are those different aspects that affect the people taking part, the people volunteering, even, your own preconceptions, reflections within that. Technological, we live in an age that seems to be technologically advancing on a regular basis. So our smartphones are changing, the way we consume technology, how we consume media is through technology, and how that changes. To a certain extent, that even impacts what we know. So if we think about sort of conspiracy theories and fake news, those are propagated through sort of technological algorithms that we may not fully understand, but we need to be aware of. So what impact does that have on the volunteers or the participants or the people running the project? But equally, are there any technological aspects that you need to be aware of? If your project requires everyone to have an iPad, but then none of your participants have iPads, then obviously there's an issue. So thinking through technology, it's not just about the hardware, it's about the software, it's things like artificial intelligence, those sort of aspects. They might have an impact on what you're thinking about. Legal is more about the framework you're operating in. So if you're operating a project in a country that's not your own, do you know the laws? What registrations are required? What insurances? What broader sort of legislation around even things around equality and gender equality, gender, sexuality equality that you may be operating in that you may not be aware of when talking and educating people. But it's also about what working practices are to a certain extent. Is if you're asking people to work for your organization, does that have what's the employment legislation around that? Equally around volunteers. And finally, environmental, which again does what it says on the tin, which is thinking about the environment. But I think within this one we can also think about just the broader working practices and the ethics of working in an organization. What's a sustainability plan? Does your project have an impact on the environment? Does it have ethical working practices? Does it even have ethical recruitment and sort of sourcing practices? So thinking about the supply chain, where you might be getting your equipment from, et cetera, and thinking about it in a much more holistic way. So next week, what you'll be doing in the middle part of the course is, again, working through these. By all means, you can start thinking about them more beforehand. These are useful to guides that you can do on yourself. If you're thinking about where you want to work, what sort of area you want to work in, understanding all those broader external factors that may shape and guide where you end up going and what you need to do. But also, it's not necessarily about just identifying the problems and the obstacles, but it's also therefore helping you to overcome those obstacles and go, okay, right, we may have a social issue here around gender equality, for example. Okay, how do we go around that? what do we need to do? Okay, right. So there might be certain factors like, campaigning around the politics here, or campaigning around getting equal pay, or how do we change those mindsets of the volunteers and the participants, in which case they might then put those political and economic pressures on there, for example, which then might change the law around this particular area. So hopefully these questions will give you an idea. This template, which we'll share with you, you can just start filling in, and we'll see you again next week. Thank you very much for listening. Cheers, bye.